Hello, welcome to the 2020 Ohioana Book Festival. I'm Robin Nesbitt and pleased to welcome you to the Contemporary Fiction panel. We want to thank all of our festival sponsors and partners, all of whom you can find listed on the Ohioana website. And thanks to our official bookseller, the Book Loft of German Village. You can get copies of all the books featured at the festival by going online to bookloft.com. And so now I'm pleased to welcome our authors. And because I'm a former librarian, we're going to do this alphabetically because that's how I like to roll. All right. So first up, we have Patricia Averbach. She's a native Clevelander, is the former director of the Chautauqua Writers Center in Chautauqua, New York. Her second novel, Resurrecting Rain by Golden Antelope Press 2020, is a finalist for Chanticleer's Somerset Award for Contemporary Fiction and the Florida Writers Association Royal Palm Literary Award. Other publications include her debut novel, Painting Bridges, and an award-winning poetry chapbook, Missing Persons, which was cited by Times of London Literary Supplement as one of the best small collections of the year. Welcome, Patricia.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Susan Petrone. She's the author of The Heebie-Jeebie Girl, The Super Ladies, Throw Like a Woman, and A Body at Rest, which won a bronze medal for regional fiction from the Independent Publishers Book Awards. The Super Ladies was a general fiction finalist in Forward Review's 2018 Book of the Year Awards. She is a recipient of an Ohio Arts Council Individual Excellence Award for fiscal year 2020. Susan's short fiction has been published by Glimmer Train, Muse, Conclave, Cleveland Review, and Whiskey Island. Her short story, Monster Jones Wants to Creep You Out, was nominated for a Pushcart Prize. Her nonfiction has appeared in Cool Cleveland, Belt Magazine, and ESPN.com. She is also one of the co-founders and former president of Literary Cleveland. LitCleveland.org. Welcome, Susan.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice. All right, next we have Bonnie Proudfoot. Bonnie received a BA in Art Ed and English Ed from Fairmont State University, an MA in English from West Virginia University, and a second MA in Creative Writing from Hollins University in Roanoke. She was awarded a fellowship for the arts and creative writing from the West Virginia Department of Culture and History for a novel in progress, and that novel, Goshen Road, has now been published by OU's Ohio University's Swallow Press. Her fiction and poetry has also appeared in journals including the Gettysburg Review, Kestrel Quarter After 8, Sheila Nagig, and Athens Voices, and is forthcoming in Pine Mountain Sand and Gravel. A short story was awarded first prize in the 2020 Sand Hills National Fiction Competition. Bonnie currently teaches part-time for the Department of English at West Virginia University. When she is not writing or grading, she can be found playing blues harmonica or working on glass art in her studio in Athens. Welcome, Bonnie.
Hi, nice to meet everybody.
Next,
Thanks.
Don Tassone. He has a degree in English from Xavier University in Cincinnati. He joined Procter & Gamble right out of college and worked there in public relations for 31 years, retiring in 2011. Since then, he's taught PR at Xavier. In 2014, he began writing creatively and submitting stories for publication. More than 200 of his stories have been published mainly in online literary magazines. Don is the author of 3 short story collections and a novel. His 4th story collection, New Twist, will be published in October. His 2nd novel and 5th story collection will be published next June and August, respectively. He lives in Loveland, Ohio with his wife, Liz, and has 4 children. Welcome, Don.
Thank you very much. Good to be with all of you.
Finally, last but not least, John Young. When he was 8 years old, John Young told his mother he wanted to be a scientist or a clown. So he spent most of his career in advertising, of course. Along the way, the native Hoosier graduated from Indiana University and scooped up an MFA in creative writing from Emerson College. He also taught English at the high school and college levels. John spent most of his adult life in the Boston area, but now lives with his wife and 2 kids in Cincinnati. When the Coin is in the Air is his first novel. His 2nd novel, Getting Huge, is out seeking an agent now. You can learn more about John and his writing at johnyoungwriter.com. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here with you guys.
All right, so we have our illustrious panel, and I know I went through all those really quickly because we really just want to hear everybody talk. So my first question for all of you is to talk about your current work and just give the audience a little feel for what it's all about. And we can go alphabetically or somebody can just jump in there. So however you want to do it. Pat, I'll just call on you. Pat, how about you start?
That's the downside of having a name that starts with an A. All right. My 2nd novel, Resurrecting Rain, is about a woman, Dina. As the book starts, her house is being auctioned off at sheriff's sale and her marriage is falling apart. Her carefully constructed life unravels, and her thoughts return to the New Moon commune outside Santa Fe, where she was born, and to her mother, who's renamed herself Rain. She's a lesbian mother, and she ran away from New Moon and from her mother when she was just 14 to go to live with her very conservative, Orthodox Jewish grandmother in Shaker Heights, a suburb of Cleveland. As Dina's story unfolds, there's a cascade of disasters that leave this middle-aged librarian unmoored from her home and family, penniless and alone on the streets of Sarasota, Florida. It's populated with characters that full of their own secrets and surprises, from Dina's blue-haired Freegan daughter and to the octogenarian TV writer who believes that crows are the reincarnated souls of Jews lost in the Holocaust. So Dina loses her house, but will she find a home? That is the story.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great, that sounds wonderful.
Oh, it's
Yeah, no, that's
some good reviews.
Yeah, oh, good.
It was fun to write, and I hope it's fun to read.
Yeah. Susan, do you want to talk a little bit about your newest work?
Sure. The Heebie-Jeebie Girl, I kind of describe it as Crime and Punishment set in 1977 Youngstown, only with jokes and magic. It's actually based a little bit on some family history. The kernel of the story is a little girl who has a habit of picking talent for picking the winning daily lottery number, and she picks it a lot. And at a certain point, when her grandmother has won a lot of money, her grandmother is robbed. And then the little girl and her great uncle kind of go off into the city and try to find the guys who robbed her. It's narrated by 4 different voices, one of which is the city of Youngstown herself. And Youngstown is a woman, so let's go right there. I consider, I think Youngstown would kind of be like the kind of crazy old lady sitting next to you at the bar, gauging drinks off of people all night and telling great stories. So there's, it's contemporary, but set a little bit in the past. And like I said, a little bit of magic, a little bit of jokes, a little bit of maybe hint of magical realism, but I think kind of a contemporary American feel of magical realism. And people seem to like it.
Awesome, that's great. Bonnie, what about your work? Tell us a little bit about your work.
So my novel's called Goshen Road. You can see a little image of the cover. I wrote this in linked narratives. So each chapter was kind of written as an independent short story, although the characters reappear in all of the story, interact with each other, and the novel progresses over about 25 years from 1967 until 1992. And it's a family that lives in West Virginia, 2 sisters, and they married 2 best friends. And their lives play out in very different ways, but they live in a very rural part of West Virginia. And I moved away from West Virginia in '96 and moved to Athens, Ohio, but I lived in a very rural part of West Virginia. So I think I picked up the cultural essences, let's just say, of what it was like to live there. And, like Susan said, Youngstown is a character. In a way, the place becomes a character in my novel, as well as the interaction between the sisters and their children. So I'll leave it at that. Like I said, it's set in West Virginia, in a very rural part of the world.
Great, thanks. It sounds wonderful. Don, what about your work?
Well, I brought along a copy. This is called Sampler. It looks backwards to me. I hope it's okay to you. This is a thin book. It's a short story collection. It came out last September. It would be the book that would be on the table at the Ohio Book Festival this year, were it not for our pandemic. But it's a book of 50 very wide-ranging short stories. They are Some of them very light, some serious. There's fantasy there. There's spirituality. There's even politics in there. So it's a by design very diverse collection based on life, right? So there's no one theme to any one of our days, and this is a collection of stories about kind of all of our days, if you will. It's also a collection of stories that are relatively short, and that's also by design. We're also busy these days, and for a range of reasons, even with COVID, I think we're busy. We're busy, almost too busy to read. And so it's not that we're not reading, although literacy rates are really down. I read somewhere the other day that the rate of reading for leisure in the United States is at an all-time low, believe it or not. It's not that we're not reading. We're reading text messages, and we're reading emails, and we're reading the scroll that crosses the bottom of our TV screens, but that's hardly reading. So I wanted to write stories that provide a little more nourishment, that are entertaining, but also are an invitation to readers to think and feel more deeply. So that was the genesis of this particular book.
Great. Thanks very much, Don. Appreciate that. Last but not least, John, how about your work?
Well, this is my first novel, When the Coin is in the Air. And it's a coming of age novel, semi-autobiographical, although certainly a work of fiction. The story of a young man named Jason Blake, who is trying to find his way, trying to find a sense of self-worth in conflict with his father and older brother. In his way of trying to find his way, he escapes to Cape Cod and then later to Europe to sort of, test himself, I guess you'd say. And in these tests, he succeeds enough that he begins to understand who he is and understand his place in the world a bit more. When he comes back from Europe, his world as he's known it growing up kind of explodes on him. His father becomes unhinged and very violent, and the clashes that occur kind of change Jason's role in the family, and eventually he falls in love with a young woman, and they escape to Boston to start a new life, if you will.
Great. So thanks everyone for sharing about your work. And so I'm going to flip it right back around on John, and we'll work backwards up the alphabet.
Great.
What inspired you to write this particular work? So everybody else can start thinking about this, but I put John on the hot seat. So
Okay.
Why this work? What inspired you? What made you think, well, this is the book I want to write, or the stories I want to write?
Yeah, I mentioned that it's semi-autobiographical. It began, I almost hesitate to say, but it began as a memoir. It was sent out by an agent to some publishers who asked me to change it into a novel. And I resisted that and stuck it in the bottom of a drawer for about 15 years. And after a long career in advertising, I sort of, stepped out of advertising, and I knew I wanted to return to fiction. And I thought, I'll start with this. And so I retooled that memoir, condensing time, moving ahead in time. I have two wonderful sisters. There are no sisters in this book. It's the two brothers. And so, that was really the inspiration, I guess, was to share something in myself, to exercise some of my own demons, but also to explore what I think are more universal truths built in an idiosyncratic family.
Cool. All right. Very good. Thank you. Appreciate that. Don, what inspired you to write your stories?
Well, now that I've had about 2 minutes to think about it, I'll answer that in a couple of different ways. First of all, just to pick up on something that John said, these are 50 stories, 50 wide-ranging stories, and they're based on, for the most part, things that are happening in everyday life. I happen to believe that some of the biggest ideas, some of the biggest ahas in life come out of some of our simplest experiences every day, simple events that happen to us every day. There's a lot of truth in that. There's a lot of profundity in that. And my stories more often than not are a combination of two things. They're something that's happened in my life or is happening in the world, combined with some larger idea. But in almost every case, the first comes first. That is, what's happening in the world really kind of informs and helps illuminate the bigger ideas. And so my hope, again, from these 50 stories is that anybody who might be reading them, can pick it up and put it down first and foremost, because we're all busy. But in doing that, get a lot of nourishment out of each story. They're all designed to provoke, not just entertain, but to provoke. And I mean that in the sense of thinking more deeply, feeling more deeply, experiencing life a little differently than you otherwise would. Other perspective I would share is that this happens to be a book of short stories. Not every book is a book of short stories of mine. I'm finished. I've just finished a second novel. I'm eager to get that out next year. I like long form and short form writing. So for me, I don't know about the others on the panel, but for me, both kind of scratch my itch. So if I did one but not the other, I would feel a little imbalanced. And so this is part of a rhythm for me. I write short form and then longer form and then short form. And it just feels like I'm kind of writing on two parallel tracks that balance me out as an author. So lately been focusing more on long form writing, but this particular book is 50 very short stories.
Great, thanks so much. Bonnie, what inspired you to write your current work?
Well, I I started with a short story, and the short story was central and kind of number 7 in 14. Then I wrote another short story, and I got both of those published, but I kept sort of thinking about the characters, and then I worked my way backwards and forward. So I didn't realize I was writing a novel, and I didn't really intend to write a novel. I thought I was just sort of coming up with really unique and interesting situations for the characters to explore. And then all of a sudden I realized this has a trajectory that's bigger than the stories itself. And in order to really make the characters resonate more, I could introduce them in another story earlier, and then when they reappeared later on in the novel, they would have already had a past. And it kind of made things easier in a way from a writer point of view, because I didn't have to like embed a lot of backstory into the novel when I was introducing a character. That character already appeared in an earlier story. So it began to build that way, and at one point I sort of had 10 stories, and then I sent out a prospectus to Swallow Press, and they sent it out to some readers and got very favorable feedback. And in the meanwhile, I wrote 4 more stories, which was kind of risky, I think. But I'm pleased with the amount of content, with the way the characters interact, and the direction. Although I do see in the future a place to take some of the characters. So they might not be done with me.
Great, thank you. Susan, what inspired you about your work? How'd you come to write?
Well, The Heebie-Jeebie Girl is actually based on some real family history. I actually both of my parents were from Youngstown. I was actually, one sibling and I are the only ones in our family who were born in Cleveland. Everyone else was born in Youngstown. So I spent a lot of time there growing up. And one of my Youngstown cousins really did go through this period where she picked the daily number. And her mom and our mutual grandmother really did win a lot of money. And I don't even know if I want to say the amount. And our grandmother really did get robbed. These 2 guys came to the house and scammed her and robbed her. So one of the narrative voices, as I said, the novel, The Heebie-Jeebie Girls, told by 4 different narrative voices, one of which is the voice of one of the guys who robs her, because that was something that had always troubled me, because, scamming and robbing my little hunched over little old grandmother. And I mean, I know it sounds really, really, really cliched, but she really was this little hunched over little Slovak lady who was, I guess, very gullible. And so that idea of, why do people do bad things, and is there redemption? Is what do you have to do to redeem yourself, to yourself, or how would you ever make amends for something like that? That was something that I'd always thought about, and it became a novel. And one of the things that I think I would love to talk with some of the other panelists about is that whole writing things from life because just because it happened in real life doesn't mean it has to happen in the novel. And so that was the impetus, was that family history and that idea and that pondering of why do people do things that harm other people, and how can you be redeemed by that or from that sin or that crime. That's all.
That's really interesting. Thanks. Pat, what inspired you about writing your current work?
Uh-oh. Did we lose her?
Pat, I think you're still on mute. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm back. Okay. I am what is known in the trade as a pantser. And I did not have a fully evolved story. I cannot say that I was, inspired by a complete vision as I started out. This story is not memoir. It is not, did not come out of my direct personal experience. I don't know any of these people, except that, of course, I know all of them. It's not that these characters are any one I know, they are everyone I know.
Oh, yeah.
I do know the places. The book takes place in 3 different locations. And its seed, the impetus, I guess, for the novel wasn't so much a story as an image of 2 women on 2 park benches across from each other, feeding crows, feeding birds. And one of them is an elderly woman, and that was somebody who was not somebody who I could give a particular name to in my life, but I know this sort of woman. And crows play a very important role in my personal history, which I will not go into here, but it was very emotional for me. So I started with this image and I started moving forward with the story. And then I realized, wait a minute, there's a whole backstory that's critical. So I stopped. I started writing the backstory, and the backstory turns out to be half the novel. So,
Wow, interesting.
and it involves someone who I did meet, about a middle-class woman who becomes homeless, and that is a central theme in the novel. The issue of homelessness, the issue of materialism and identity, and the meaning of home. So that's those are the themes that I played with throughout that book.
Great. Thank you, Pat. So I'll throw this question out. We'll let somebody, instead of doing the alphabetical thing, I'll let somebody nibble on it. A lot of folks that will watch this panel are aspiring writers. And so this is kind of a combo question. Like, how did you decide to become a writer? Some of you were in the corporate world and moved over into creative writing. So, how did you decide to become a writer, and how did you make that switch if you were in another a field? So I'll just throw that out there and let somebody grab on that one. Start us off.
John, you were in the corporate world.
It says the corporate guy. Yeah, Don was almost a client of mine. I spent a long time in advertising, mostly in the Boston area, but for about 12 years here in Cincinnati. For me, it was it was another creative outlet to go into advertising and to use the pen to make a living. I was a copywriter and then eventually a creative director and executive creative director. So, I really started wanting to write pretty seriously when I was about 19 or 20. Just getting exposed to a lot of literature as an English major at Indiana University, and it drove me to think about that and to think about writing myself, and just start noodling with that a bit. And finally have had the time to really devote to it. And I'm more interested in the long form than the short form, although I've written a lot of short stories too. Something about that appeals to me more, that idea of the marathon.
Great, thank
I'll
you.
go go ahead, Robin.
No, go ahead, Don.
I'll go as a corporate guy here, former corporate guy. I was an English major in college. I've always loved writing. Always fashioned myself a writer of sorts. Right out of school, I went to work for P&G and spent 31 years there. Did a lot of writing as part of my role, which was in public relations, but that was business writing predominantly. When I retired, I had an idea in my mind I'd like to write creatively. In fact, I'd been carrying an idea for a short story around for years, and I just hadn't had time to develop it into a story. So I tried to do that. And I spent a lot of time on it and was pretty proud of it. I shared with a couple of people who I really trust and who I knew would give me honest feedback, and they read it. And the consensus was it wasn't good at all. One of them said, "This is crap. This is crap." I said, "Crap." And she said, "Yeah, it reads like a memo. It reads like a memo." And I realized then, you know what? I have to do more than just flip a switch here. I really need to go back to school. I really need to get some training on how to write creatively after all these years of doing a ton of writing, but again, serious business writing for the most part. So I went away to a 1-week workshop, writing workshop in a place called New Harmony, Indiana, which is near Evansville. And I was hanging out there for a week with a bunch of 20-somethings. And this was a re-immersion in the fundamentals of writing, taught by great people who were, for the most part, great writers themselves, but also faculty members around the country. And these 20-somethings who I came in, I was kind of arrogant. I thought, I looked at them and I said, I've probably written more than all of you guys combined, which is probably true. It was probably true at that point. I quickly found out I could write rings around me. They were really accomplished writers. I learned a lot from them. We learned a lot, I think, from each other. So this was a great immersion. And after that, I kind of took a fresh start, if you will. So I started over. And the balance of that summer, this was about 6 years ago now, I spent writing just one story, which was a nonfiction piece, which was a long piece. And I submitted it around to various publications, got tons of rejections. And finally, I got an acceptance from a funky online monthly literary magazine called Red Fez. It's really out there. And they picked this up. I almost couldn't believe it. I was opening my email and expecting rejections every day. And this guy said, "I like this, I'll accept this." And he did. It ran that December, and it was nominated for the Pushcart Prize. And after that, I just kept writing. I never really looked back. As you said, Robin, in the opening, I've now had over 200 stories published, 4 books, and 3 on deck. So I'm excited about those coming out this fall and next year. But as I reflect on the experience for especially those who are new to writing, creative writing, who are aspiring or emerging writers as I am, I would say, 3 things strike me. First is ask yourself, do you love writing? I think everybody here has said in one way or another they love writing. I do. And we have gifts. Our gifts are not unlimited, but we're gifted people, and we can use those gifts in any number of ways. But why do just anything? Why not do what you love? If you love writing, do it. Second is it's hard work, as we all know. This is hard work. This is not the glamorous, Hollywood writer kind of a thing. This is hard work. The writing itself hard. We've talked a little bit about that already. From the ideation stage to actually getting it down in draft form. That alone is a piece of work. And then beyond that, the rewriting. Right? Hemingway said, "All writing is really rewriting." And then once you're past that, you've got the process of trying to get it submitted. And kind of the business end of writing. And then if you're lucky enough to get a book out, you got to promote it. And that's hard. All of that is hard. It's hard. Especially that last part, which is so tedious and so time consuming and so boring and can even be demoralizing, all the rejections you get. But that's an important part of the writing process. And I'm glad I've spent the time and continue to spend the time to go through that, because I think that makes us a more complete writer. And then the third piece really is about doing it, doing it daily if you can. And as you do that, as I have done that, I have felt I'm becoming a better writer. Yep, I had 31 years of business writing, but this is really about starting over, kind of taking a leap in a new direction, if you will. And it's learning a whole new way of writing. It's almost like a new language for me, writing. But as you get better, as your skills improve and the quality of your writing improves, your confidence grows. And I think that in turn feeds your your ability to write well. And so that third piece is really, really important. So if anybody says to you out there who are aspiring writers or emerging writers, you've done X all your life. Why in the world do you think you can do Y? My suggestion would be smile and nod, and then jump off a cliff and keep your hand moving.
Sounds good. Thanks, Don. Pat, Susan, or Bonnie, how did you guys decide to become a writer?
Well, I'll go. Probably I was in 5th grade, and I went to, my parents sent all of us to parochial school, and I had to write this essay. It was like, not to sound flippant, but like it was about God. I wasn't being disingenuous, but I think it was the first time that I ever wrote for an audience, and my audience was Sister Aloysius, and she loved it. She loved it so much she gave it to the principal. Principal loved it. My mother loved it. They all liked it, and I was like, oh, for an 11-year-old, that's a very heady experience because you don't have a whole lot of power when you're in 5th grade, and to see that what I had written affected people was, wow, this is like a superpower. This is great. So then that's when I decided that I wanted to be a writer. And I have made my living as a writer primarily in nonprofits and higher education and the arts because that just seemed to fit my personality. So I've done a wide variety of writing for a living. I've also taught as an adjunct for Hiram College, taught writing, and I always told my students, if you can write well, you can always find a job. Writing, so learn how to write well, you'll never be unemployed. As far as writing fiction, I think it is a matter of persistence. A lot of people told me a long time ago, you got to write 1 million words of dreck before you get anything good. So from 5th grade on, I know I wrote my 1 million words. And you do get better, and you need to read a lot. One of my mentors growing up was a man named Don Bianchi, who was one of the founders of Dobama Theater. And he always said that your input needs to match your output. Basically, read as much as you write. And for me as an arrogant teenager, I was like, oh, really? You gotta read? What? They don't know anything. I know. Yeah, put your ego aside, read everything. And look at it, read it, not just as a reader, but read it as a writer. Look at craft. And after a while, you actually start to understand what the word craft means. So you go, oh, wow, that's a beautifully constructed sentence. That, that is the right adjective, or that's the right lack of an adverb. And that's a beautifully constructed paragraph. And then you go, oh, that's a beautifully constructed story or a beautifully constructed novel. And you start learning how to build it. So yeah, if you are in 5th grade and you're watching this and you said, I want to be a writer, do it. Just don't let the rejection get you down, because you're going to get rejected. Doesn't matter.
Great advice. Thank you. Pat or Bonnie?
Okay, I'll jump in. I'm one of those, or I was one of those kids who always knew they wanted to be a writer. And I came across a little 6th grade autograph book that we got when we graduated from elementary school. And you had to write down what you wanted to be when you grew up. And I wanted to be a poetess, not a poet, but a poetess.
I love it.
And I went on and wrote a lot of poetry and submitted it to some contests as a kid and had, some kid type success, and went on and studied English for a while. But where I was, they were only doing kind of the high criticism and nothing creative. I don't think that there was such a thing as a creative writing class where I was in those Case Western Reserve back in the day. And I kind of got turned off. And then, of course, I was being pressured by family in the real world to find a way to make a living, as we all are. And I went off in a more conventional and safe direction for many years until I brought my family to the Chautauqua Institution when I was already well into middle age and started taking workshops there. And like Don found that classes and workshops really, changed his identity as a writer and his skill as a writer. I found that those workshops made all the difference. And I would really suggest that, anyone who is serious about wanting to write, either go into a good MFA program or find high-level workshops with professional leadership. There's only so far you can go with a group of friends. It's not that that group of friends is not without value, but real professional input, somebody who can tell you that stuff is crap, is really of great value, and who can point you toward the best writing and kind of make it changed my perspective. Instead of being, somebody who always wanted to be a writer, I was able to start thinking of myself as a writer among other writers. And it made a very big difference in my trajectory. And I was able then to go on, and I've written, a couple novels now. I've written a lot of poetry. And I found writing poetry is a wonderful, wonderful in itself, of course, but also wonderful as an exercise to enhance your prose writing. Because it teaches you word choice. It teaches you what to leave out. It teaches you precision. It trains your ear. When you've got a clunky sentence, it's clunky. That's been my history.
Thanks, Pat. And Bonnie, how about you?
It's so interesting to hear about everybody's journey. I just went right into English and art classes when I went for education, so English and art ed. But while I was going for that degree, we started a literary magazine, and in the literary magazine among the undergrads, we published all our own work. Wasn't that wonderful? So we critiqued our own work, but we also published our own work. And I think I gravitated towards academic writing programs right away. I really didn't have any doubt in my mind. And then I had a choice. What did I want to get a master's degree in? And I thought, if I had a body of work that I wanted to accomplish in art, that I thought I would need the critique and I would need instruction for, I would go for art. But I thought, no, I can do art on my own. I really want the sort of oversight and the energy of being in more creative writing classes. So I took an English degree with a creative writing specialization from West Virginia University, and wrote poetry and fiction while I was there. And then I went for a master's degree at Hollins, which was college then, and it wasn't an MFA at the time, it was Hollins College, and it was another, master's, MA. But it was 1 year of paradise for me, just being in this creative writing program with feedback, writing poetry, and also writing fiction and writing short stories. I think I wrote something like 30 poems and 5 short stories, placed quite a few of those, and won an award while I was there. So I thought, okay, I'm ready to go, except that I had to make a living. And so then I started teaching, which is draining, but also rewarding on but it does take all your creativity to teach, be a professor of English, and that's what I was. So my writing took sort of a back seat, in the summer times I'd plot away at a few little projects, write poetry, write criticism, and I even organized literary festivals and ran a literary journal, at the college I taught at in Nelsonville, Ohio, and Hocking College. And it was a fantastic experience because I got to bring writers in, but I wasn't writing. And then at some point I thought, I have this project I started a while ago, and I won a fellowship on it. I got all these stories going. I even published a couple of stories, and just something told me that if not now, when, really? And if I had to give anybody any advice, I mean, I loved the creative writing programs that I was in, and I loved the instruction, but be very careful about who you work with. You want people who don't try to diminish your gift. You want people who encourage your gift and who are honest also. But you have to watch out. Any kind of graduate program, there's a lot of sort of like trendy stuff that comes down the pike, and a lot of people want to follow this postmodern person or that postmodern person, and really be true to yourself and be true to your characters. That would be anyway. I don't know. Some people might not see it. That might not be beneficial advice for somebody, but for me, as I went back to the novel that I worked on, I had to be as honest as I could be. And partly I think it's because the genre I wrote in is Appalachian fiction, and I know the people I was writing about, even though it's not based literally on the people that I was writing about. These are composites of people I met, and even my own life factors in, although, only persons who knew me very well would know where is what. But I refuse to be, to overgeneralize, to stereotype, to rely on stereotypes that were already out there in the world. And I had to be true to the material. And I wanted to push, at that point when I really started writing, I did not want to read all the work that was done by other people in this genre. I had read enough. I wanted to just focus on what I wanted to say with the characters and allow them to do the talking for themselves. So be careful about your influences, be careful about what you read, and stay true to your goals and your mission as a writer is what I would say.
Great advice from everybody, and really interesting stories. One of the questions I like to ask or hear answered from writers, and you guys may cringe at this, but I'm always fascinated by process. Like, what is your process? Like, are you a morning writer? Are you an evening writer? Are you like, well, I have to write in longhand, I have to type, I have to have a certain chair. So talk a little bit about your process, if you would. And I'll just throw it out there and let somebody grab on it, or I'll call on you.
I'm not muted, so I might as well, then I'll mute. I'm a runner. So if I get a piece going and then I go out for a run, scenes will play out in my head. And that, it's that Tilly Olsen, I stand here ironing. When I drive, it's horrible to say this, but thank God for the iPhone because I can dictate. If I try to force myself, and I don't exactly know where I'm going, I wind up sort of tearing stuff up and rewriting. But at some point, I think for me, in the exertion of jogging on a treadmill, or now the gyms are closed, so I'm out there jogging on the road, or even walking the dog, or doing that kind of energetic thing, puts your brain in a place where your imagination can sort of work loose. So I try to tap into that. And it comes. I don't know where it comes from. It just comes.
I'm going to jump in right after Bonnie, just because I have the same experience. I'm a cyclist and a runner, and there is something, you're using just enough of your brain power to like do what you have to do, and then you're doing something, and then the rest of your imagination can just wander. And I don't know, I think that there's that beautiful place where you can start telling yourself stories. As far as like when I write, mainly in the evening, just because that's when my daughter was little. She's a teenager now, but when she was little, that would be the time that you had to write. You ignore your family and you go upstairs after dinner and you write, or you stay up late. So I just kind of put it in when I have the time, because writing's work. It's not, if you sit around, wait for the muse to descend, you are going to be waiting for Godot, man. Just do it. Just write. Even if you're writing garbage, sooner or later, you will be the monkey that types Hamlet. You just have to keep doing it.
Well said.
I'll jump in after that because like Bonnie and Susan, I'm a runner. I run every day. And that is material for this and this whole process. I usually get up early. I usually get up before, when it's still dark, before light. Can't run then. So I start writing, and I find I do my best writing in the morning. Maybe others do too. Well, you're fresh, and I always look back at what I'd written the previous day and think, oh, that was so great then, but it's a piece of crap this morning. And just have fresh eyes on it, right? And the things that you do at night, I mean, it's just crazy. Speaking of monkeys typing, you know, my God, I look at it again fresh in the morning, and there's always a way to tune it up. There's always a way to kind of build that momentum back up again. Then I go for a run, and it exercises a completely different set of you know, body parts. It exercises your mind. It's very therapeutic for me. I run typically in nature. I'm kind of a nature guy, and when I write, I like to write out in my sunroom, which is surrounded by beautiful scenery and nature. That's inspiring to me. And what I find is when I'm running, I'm asking myself 1,000 questions about my own writing. I'm writing in my head. And in many cases, I can't wait to get back to my laptop. I do write typically on a laptop, not longhand anymore. It's easier for me. And then I get that into the mix, and then I might lay off for the rest of the day, or maybe I dabble here and there. But I would say the bulk of my writing is done and done best in the morning. And I would say it's inextricably linked with the exercise, with the running. Somehow the physical and the mental feed each other.
Yep.
Pat or John?
Jump in, Pat. You go next. You have to unmute.
Okay, I will. For many years, I used to call myself a binge writer, and I thought that was very cute. But because what it meant was that I would go for long periods without writing, and then, you know, I'd catch the wind and I would write like crazy for a while, and then exhaust whatever that vein was, and stop writing again until the next inspiration. And it wasn't cute. What it really meant was that I was an undisciplined writer. And I've really made an effort now to write through those periods. Usually for me, it's about plot. Where, where I simply can't, I don't know what happens next. I'm not somebody who has it all outlined. The stories tend to evolve more organically out of the situation and out of the characters. And what I'm learning is that if I sit and write, the characters and the situations do eventually take me in the right direction. It may mean that I write for a few days and wind up throwing out a lot of paper, but eventually I do get there. And I'm learning to do that.
Yeah.
And it's a success just to have made it to, you know, to find that discipline in the writing. I also empathize with the runners. I am not a runner, but I'm a walker, and I'm a driver. I often find that either driving long distances by myself allows your mind to kind of, your conscious mind to kind of take a back seat.
Yep.
And the subconscious starts to burble up and provide some very good material.
John?
Yeah, I love hearing all this stuff. I too sort of exercise a bit and sometimes use that as a framework for solving a problem. You know, usually get up pretty early and start early in the morning. And when I begin to write myself into a corner, it's time to get some exercise and work out those kinks. You know, I agree 100% with those of you who are saying, you know, that discipline of writing every day is super important. And one of the other things, I've been fortunate to know some pretty great writers over the years and meet some interesting people. And I was fortunate enough to live in Beverly, Massachusetts for a long time, for about 20 years, and got to know John Updike a little bit. And you know, one of the things he told me that really changed me as a writer, especially as a novelist, I think it's important. He talked about the idea of, you know, having a sense of the arc of the story and knowing where you're going to land and writing to that landing place. I've had one of my best friends is a novelist, and he's totally against that. He wants to start from scratch, and the whole process is a discovery for him. Another writer, James Carroll, in Boston, he writes 75-page long outlines before he starts. And I'm sort of more sort of the path that Updike described as one that seemed to make sense to me, to have a sense of the narrative arc, to know where I'm landing and to work toward that ending. That really helps me kind of have a sense of direction every day when I sit down to write. And then I usually try to stop when I still feel like there's a little fuel in the tank, so that in the morning I sit down and I'm kind of excited to get started because I know that there's a scene I need to finish, or that the characters are going to walk out of this bar together and I know what's going to happen when they get to the street. That gets me started in the morning, and from there I'm able to sort of continue usually.
Great, thank you. So I'm gonna kind of throw this open because a lot of times, as you're on a panel, you're like, well, why didn't they ask this question? Or I want to talk about this, or I want to answer this question. So this is kind of your opportunity to talk. Is there advice you'd like to give? Is there something I haven't asked yet that you'd like to address or talk about? If you don't have advice, what do you like to read? So I'm just going to kind of open that up just a little bit as we come upon closer to the end of our panel here, and just kind of let you, freestyle a little bit. So either advice or what you like to read, or why didn't she ask that question? I wanted to answer that. So I'll throw it out there, let you go.
Well, I saw somebody there's actually a comic book writer in England named David Barnett who posted something on Twitter this morning. It's like, who are the writers that you will buy their book even if you have no idea what it's about? Like, just because you trust that writer. And so I'd just be curious to see what the other people on the panel would say, and I'll share mine now or later. But I'm curious what everyone would like. Who are the writers that you'll just like, you see so-and-so has a new book out, boom, I got it. I don't care what the plot is.
Good question.
Yeah, that is a good question.
Yeah.
Susan, why don't you go ahead and take a stab at it, and then the other people can
Okay. I put down Mary Doria Russell, amazing writer. D.M. Pooley, Karen Joy Fowler. Who else did I put down? Michael Chabon. Stuart Onan. Those are probably the ones that, like, I haven't read anything by them that I didn't like. Let's put it that way. What do you got, guys?
Good list, Susan.
I'm just going to say that it's too bad Toni Morrison passed away, because she would be number one on my list. And if they find any more manuscripts,
Go.
have to read whatever they come up with. Louise Erdrich, I adore her.
Oh God, yes.
And she's fantastic. And I
Yeah.
really, she's just been in
Gotta add
a
her.
way like, and the person that you're writing to, even though you kind of don't want to get paralyzed with fear by writing to somebody that fantastic, but sort of like, oh, maybe someday. And Lee Smith, who I adore. She's one of my heroes in Appalachian literature, and anybody who ever gets a chance to see Lee Smith in person, you'll be so amazed and charmed to watch her at work. But she's fantastic. Those are my three. I'm just going to put them out there. I'll probably think of 20 more immediately.
Yeah.
Well, I'll throw out two. I'm a pretty eclectic reader, not a voracious reader, not as voracious a reader as I should be, but I do read a lot, and I have a lot of variety in my reading. But I'm going to throw out two names that may surprise you, and maybe a little bit off the track here. But I keep finding myself coming back to Walt Whitman, and I'm current Walt Whitman, and I'm currently reading,
Love Whitman.
rereading Leaves of Grass for the umpteenth time. Every time I read it, I get something else out of it, and I'm amazed that he's such an innovator, right? The language was never the same after him, and poetry certainly never the same after him. And I admire that. He was an adventurer, and I really respect that and admire that. Not to mention just a great, ounce for ounce, just a great poet. The other, kind of on the other end of the spectrum, despite what I said a few minutes ago about how busy we are and how I tend to write for busy readers, very short stories, even 100-word stories, flash fiction. I've just finished recently a book by Ron Chernow. You all know him because of Hamilton, but he also wrote a big fat book called Washington, A Life. It's 928 pages. It'll give you a hernia. So get it on Kindle. But, it stretches me. When I read somebody like that, and I learned a hell of a lot about Washington, I have even more admiration for him. That's a writer with discipline. That's a writer with discipline. I take a lot of nourishment from that. I don't know how long it took him to write it. Probably a decade, I don't know. But I find that stretching in and of itself. So a lot of writers, authors in between there, but reading Hemingway recently. And I have great new favorite writers like John Young. John's novel last year was a highlight for me, When the Coin is in the Air. And he has another great short story collection coming out. I've read all of those too.
Oh, thank you, Don.
Exploring new writers too stretches you. But I find myself kind of consistently going back to the classics as well.
Ad or John?
Okay. I adore Margaret Atwood and have followed her since her first book in 1970, when I thought I had discovered her. I was living in Toronto. But I've pretty much read almost everything she's written since then. So I am an enormous fan. And I also like another Canadian, Alice Munro, and have read a lot of her. There's an American, Richard Russo, who I just love his characters and his sense of place. He's a very male writer as opposed to the ladies. But his humor, his insight into those kind of working class relationships are just fabulous.
Yeah.
And I think I've hoped he was an influence on some of my writing, where I've tried to create not just a place, but an entire community. And he's been the inspiration for my effort to create that. I like Barbara Kingsolver, Louise Erdrich. There's an awful lot. It's hard to narrow it down.
Yes.
On to John, but it would be a long list. I am a reader.
Yeah, I think I'm like Don, and I'm a pretty eclectic reader. So I'll read 2 or 3, maybe 4 books from any one author, and I try to move on to someone else. I feel like there's this, next to my bed, and I was looking over here at this big bookcase next to me, and I'm going, holy cow, it's like, where are the patterns? There definitely are some. Jane Smiley, I think, is a really terrific writer, and I think she's someone people will be reading for the ages. John Powers, I think, is he wrote a really terrific book in the Overstory. Mary Moore has done some beautiful work, and John Irving is another one I like a lot. I like his sense of humor and how he can blend the tragic and the humorous in such a nice way. So those are just a few, but I think I go along with my colleagues here to say if there's young aspiring writers out there that, reading is such a key to learning how to write. And, as Bonnie said, and Susan, I know you did too, about the idea of just taking those sentences apart and looking at them and learning from them, and reading. To learn to read as a writer is different than just a casual reader. To learn to spot, oh my God, that's a terrific verb, and to sort of get really good at verbs. You know, it's a really important piece of writing. And it's a lot of lazy writing is when people are using too many linking verbs where they can go back and recook a sentence and add a really colorful verb that's just the right verb that powers the reader ahead. You know, things like that are really important, I think. And it takes a little longer to read like that, but if you want to write, that's how you sort of study a work.
Great advice. Thank you. Everybody's given some really good information. I'm going to wrap this up with a final question. One nugget of advice you'd give to aspiring writers. Several of you have mentioned advice throughout, and if you want to repeat that, that's fine. But we'll start with Pat, and we'll just go through the alphabet. What's your nugget of advice you would give to an aspiring writer?
Read. Read everything. Read good stuff, read bad stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be it.
Susan?
Best advice I've ever gotten actually was from Mary Doria Russell, and I can't remember who told her. Every word in your manuscript must do one of three things. Develop character, advance the plot, or delight the reader. Boom, there you go.
Yeah, nice. I like
Right.
that.
That's all you have to do.
That's all you gotta do,
Yeah.
delight the reader.
Easy peasy. Bonnie?
I think that's terrific, Susan. I love that. What they said plus this. I think about 30 years ago, I read a book called Becoming a Writer, and for the life of me, can't remember the name of the author. I should just shoot myself now, but she said, never talk about what your next writing project is going to be.
Boom.
Zip it. Don't go to a cocktail party is her example that she used, and blab about what your next wonderful thing that you're going to write about is.
Right.
And
It was Dorothy,
your subconscious will want to tell the story. You'll be driven to tell that story.
Yeah.
And the quieter you keep it, the more you'll have the impetus to
write
write
it.
it out.
Yeah.
Good advice.
Don?
Well, I would say to the aspiring and emerging writers out there, and I consider myself one, you know, you had a life before you were a writer, and that life is important. You bring it with you. You bring all of your skills, all of your experience with you. Certainly a lot of the skills that I developed and hopefully perfected over the course of my career, I have brought with me. But if I had only done that, I'd just be writing better memos, you know, better speed, better news releases. That's all I'd be doing. So at some point, we take a new direction, and I think that's daunting. That can be daunting. It can be scary. But I would say also that's where the joy is. That's where the growth is. And so jump into it. Ray Bradbury, one of my favorite authors, said we've got to jump off a cliff and build our wings on the way down. And I think that really rings true to me. I think there's joy in that, and a whole new experience out there, and a whole new kind of lease on life out there. So writing affords that to you, but it's not necessarily linear. It is that jumping off. It's like doing something you've never done before, and I would just say embrace it.
Thank you. John?
You know, I would love to blab on with advice, as my college-age son would attest. But I saw something yesterday. I get this blog emailed to me daily from Seth Godin, and so I just want to read yesterday's entry because it was one of my favorites, and it's about rejection. And you have to build the hide of an elephant if you're going to really do this, because rejection is so much a part of it. And no matter how successful you are, you know, it's a bloody business, and you're going to get cut and you're going to get beat up. And anyway, this is a nice little piece that Seth Godin wrote. He said, rejected. They didn't reject you. They rejected an application. They rejected a business plan. They rejected a piece of paper. They don't know you. And I think that's an important thing to think about, is that, you know, you're okay. You know, they're rejecting the work, and the work might need a revision. The work might need a lot of maturity. A work might need, like Don was talking about, you know, go to a workshop and learn from people who've been down this path a few times. But it's not about you. It's about the work. And the rejections are about the work.
Good point.
Great advice. That's a great note to end on. So thank you, John. Thanks again to our panelists, Pat Averbach, Susan Patron, Bonnie Proudfoot, Don Tessone, and John Young. A reminder that you can get copies of the books by each one of our authors, and please do consider that, from the Book Loft of German Village at bookloft.com. Thanks again to our festival sponsors and partners, and thank you for joining us. Please check out the Ohioana website for all this year's festival programming. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Robin.
But